Rahman Rahim. So this room is about Ibn Arabi. If you don't know Ibn Arabi, uh, he was an Islamic mystic, a philosopher, and in traditional terms, he was a Sufi. He was born in 1165 in Spain and died in 1240 in Syria, in Damascus. So he's a fundamental figure in Islamic mysticism and Islamic philosophy, mainly known for his ideas about the nature of existence and his unique way of interpreting Quran and in explaining it in mystical terms. For Ibn Arabi, there are few main sources of any epistemological content. It could be one is Quran, obviously the revelation, the Naql, which is Quran and Sunnah, and the other more interesting thing is obviously there is some aql as well. There's some reason and rationality as well. And the more important thing is shuhud, which is ilme huzuri, which is presentational knowledge and which is immediate knowledge. So these are the few sources which Ibn Arabi uses to draw upon his mystical experiences and explain Quran and Sunnah in a mystical light. If we are to talk about the sources, as in the works that Ibn Arabi is getting his ideas from, it is highly hadith centric and Quran centric. And in Arabi, as well as the other Sufi traditions, you would see that a hadith can be brought up even if they are not sahih, even if they are zaif, they can be brought up to corroborate, and strengthen a point. That is the methodology of not only Ibn Arabi, but even the previous Sufis, such as Hujjatul Islam, Imam Ghazali, rahmatullahi alayhi. So, uh, the Ibn Arabi is obviously he's drawing upon a wide range of traditions, which might include, as modern studies suggest, which might include even Iranian sources, natural Iranian sources, Zoroastrian sources, which may include Neoplatonic sources, but that is not a confirmed thing. But what is confirmed is that he drew upon from Quran and Sunnah, from works of Ikhwanu Sata, the Brethren of Purity, the group after which this group is named. And he obviously drew upon from Imam Ghazali as well as Ibn Sina and others. What can be said is that he had a more extensive knowledge of Ashari Aqidah, uh, which is an Aqidah school, which is a theological school in Sunni Islam. If we are to compare it to his knowledge of the terminologies of the Falsafa. But it can be said that his views about ontology are much more similar to the views of Falsafa than the Mutakallimin, than the Asharites. Ibn Arabi, after his death, found gave ijaza to his stepson, whose name was Qunavi, Sadruddin Qunavi. He's also called Sheikhul Kabir. Ibn Arabi himself is called Sheikhul Akbar, and his stepson, Qunavi is called Sheikhul Kabir. Qunavi moved to Konya, where he had cordial relationships, and his students had cordial relationships with Maulana Rumi as well, right? And that is where the tradition of Rumi and tradition of Ibn Arabi, the two great Sufis, overlap with each other as well. From Ibn Arabi onwards, the followers of Qunavi, Sheikh al-Kabir Qunavi, went to all of the world, to be honest. And, they went to Syria, they went to Iran, they went to Azerbaijan, they went to Pakistan, they went to India, they went to Indonesia even, so they were spread far and wide. By the 1800s, Ibn Arabi was taught as the basic and most fundamental text of higher classes of mysticism and falsafa in both the Dars-e-Nizami of Turkish Ottoman Empire and the Dars-e-Nizami of the Sunni world in the Indian subcontinent. So this is a little history of the impact of Ibn Arabi and how he has been impactful in nearly all of the Islamic tradition. And now today the topic we are going to discuss is that whether Ibn Arabi was a pantheist or was he a monotheist and a monist. So we have Dr. Khalil Andani here, and now inshallah he'll say something about this. So yes, Dr. Andani.
Yes, thank you for that. So, this is an important topic, often misunderstood, and it's important to delineate what are the definitions. So, like, monism and pantheism are terms that are of modern origin. They have been defined and coined, in the last 300 years, in a Christian, modern Christian context, right? And pantheism, generally speaking, is the word means like all is God, right? Pan means like the all, the whole, the obviously theos, God. So pantheism is a ontological position that says everything, all things taken together are God. Okay, all things, all these discrete things, what we call the universe. The universe is God. All things are God. Now, monism is different from pantheism. Monism is actually a very general term, and monism is the idea that reality fundamentally is one, single. Okay, fundamental reality is one. That's monism, and there's many different theological and philosophical positions that could fall under monism, because monism is a very broad umbrella term. So it's already difficult to deal with some of this terminology because it's all been sort of made up and defined recently. But we can easily answer the question: is Ibn Arabi a pantheist? Right? Is he a pantheist? So does Ibn Arabi believe that all existing things taken together as a totality, as a collective, does he believe that all things taken together equals God, is God? That's really the fundamental question. And to be honest, it's a very easy answer. Like, the easy answer is no. Ibn Arabi is not a pantheist. There has been some older academic studies, like Orientalist studies from the early part of the 20th century, that just very casually and carelessly used this phrase, pantheism, to talk about Ibn Arabi. People did do that. But this is false. This is inaccurate, and authors such as William Chittick, who's the modern expert on Ibn Arabi, and Muhammad Rustam, they have both written in peer-reviewed journal articles and books that it is completely false to describe Ibn Arabi's ontology and worldview as pantheism. It's completely false. And again, this is an academic opinion. Now, why is it false? So keep in mind that pantheism literally means that the all, everything, every particular discrete thing, all of them taken together are God. That's pantheism. A lazy way of putting it would be pantheism says the universe, the physical universe, is God. Or to put it in another way, pantheism says the set of all things taken together is God. And that's pantheism. And I'm going to try to explain why this formulation, this pantheism, is not an accurate description of what Ibn Arabi believes. So what does Ibn Arabi believe? Now, look, Ibn Arabi is a complex thinker. He did not write systematically. His reflections and ideas are scattered throughout his many works. which are both mystical and philosophical. He is what I would call a philosophizing mystic. So I'm going to give my interpretation of Ibn Arabi, but my interpretation of Ibn Arabi is really just a restatement of what the experts like William Chittick and Reza Shahkazemi and Muhammad Rustam have said. Okay, so I'm just relaying the main exegesis of Ibn Arabi that has come from these other scholars. This is certainly not my own invention. I, of course, have published on Ibn Arabi. I have an article. My interest is more so his understanding of the light of Muhammad and things like this. But on this topic, I'm just relaying what academics have told us already. So there are several fundamental points, and I'll just say them by summary, and we can unpack them later on. So first of all, uh, for Ibn Arabi, God is the necessary being, or the necessary existent through itself. What this basically means is that God for Ibn Arabi is self-sufficient, independent being, or self-sufficient, independent reality. This is a point where all the Islamic philosophers, mystics, agree on that God is self-sufficient, independent, unconditioned reality. Everybody agrees on this. Where Ibn Arabi's take is interesting is how does Ibn Arabi frame the relationship between God, the absolute self sufficient reality, and what is other than God, which is what we call creation or cosmos. What is that relationship? Given this understanding of God, what is the ontological status of creation or cosmos? This is where Ibn Arabi has a unique contribution. So, according to Ibn Arabi, what is other than God, okay, the cosmos, the creation, from the highest level of creation all the way to the lowest level of creation, rather than saying that God exists and creation exists, rather than saying this, which is the very common way of talking about things, and rather than saying that God exists necessarily and creation exists contingently, Ibn Arabi will say, or what he does say, is that God is absolute unconditioned existence, Wujood mutlaq, and creation, taken individually or as a whole, the creation or the cosmos is, broadly speaking, the locus of manifestation of God. Now, what does this mean? The Arabic word he uses is mazhar. So, God is absolute unconditioned existence, and creation is the mazhar, the locus of manifestation, or a mirror in which there appears a limited reflection of God or absolute unconditioned existence. I'm going to repeat that. For Ibn Arabi, God is absolute unconditioned existence, wujud mutlaq, and the universe or the cosmos, taken collectively or individually, is nothing more than a locus of manifestation or a mirror, an empty mirror, in which a limited reflection of God or pure existence appears. That is the summary formulation of what Ibn Arabi believes. So, what does this mean for the God cosmos relationship? It would mean that the cosmos does not actually possess existence, whether you say it's existence in general or even contingent existence. The cosmos does not possess existence. Rather, the cosmos is a very limited reflection, or to be precise, the cosmos is a mirror that displays a very limited reflection of pure absolute existence, which is God. So it would be wrong in Ibn Arabi's view to say God exists and the universe exists. Okay, like he would be against that particular formulation because that formulation means that there are two existences. There are two wujuds, God and the cosmos. There's God's wujud and the cosmos's wujud, and that would be a duality. But for Ibn Arabi, wujud or existence is fundamentally unitary or one. You cannot have two existences. What you can have, in his view, is one single existence, and you can have many mirrors or loci of manifestation, each of which displays a very limited reflection of that one existence, which would be God. That is Ibn Arabi's view in a nutshell. Now, this does not amount to pantheism, and here's why it doesn't amount to pantheism. In pantheism, you would say that the universe or the cosmos, what we call everything other than God, pantheism would say that the collection of all things in the cosmos is God. The collection. Okay? It's almost like a whole part relationship of sorts. That's what pantheism would amount to. So pantheism would mean that God equals the totality of things. Okay? That's pantheism. Ibn Arabi doesn't believe that. Let me quote from Ibn Arabi. This is from the Sufi Path of Knowledge, page 89. This is a quote from the Futuhat al-Makkiyah of Ibn Arabi as translated by William Chittick. And here in this one sentence, Ibn Arabi actually refutes pantheism. So he says, God is identical with the existence, Wujood, of the things, but he is not identical with the things. Let me repeat that again. God is identical with the existence of the things, but he is not identical with the things. So that second line, identical with the things, i.e., identical with the totality of things in the cosmos, that's pantheism, right? That's what pantheism actually means. But Ibn Arabi rejects that. Ibn Arabi is saying here that God is not identical to a particular created thing, nor is God identical to just the collection of all created things, which we call the cosmos. So Ibn Arabi has actually rejected pantheism when he says this. Here's another quote from Ibn Arabi. This is from let me tell you, page 90 of the same book. Okay? So it says here, God is identical to all things in manifestation, but he is not identical to them in their essences. Now, by manifestation here, manifestation refers to not the things themselves, right? But to what is being reflected in them or on them, right? That's manifestation, because each thing is a locus of manifestation or a mirror for the reflection of God. So when Ibn Arabi says he's identical to all things in manifestation, what he's saying is that these things individually or collectively, what they are reflecting in a limited way is God. What they reflect is God. But they themselves, taken individually or as a set, they themselves, in their essences, God is not identical to that. And that's what this says. He is identical to all things in manifestation, but he is not identical to them in their essences. So this is again another refutation of pantheism, right? So nobody can really say that Ibn Arabi is a pantheist. The key in his view is to understand how he understands the relationship between God, who he refers to as the necessary through itself. For him, that is God, and the cosmos, which is not identical to God. He says the cosmos is created by God, but for him, when God creates something, what is happening is that God is not making a second wujud or a second existence. Rather, God is manifesting a mirror in which his wujud, the wujud of God, is being partially reflected, not even fully reflected, but partly reflected, because God is infinite, and therefore the reflection or the manifestation of God that is actually appearing within these mirrors, which is what we call the cosmos. The manifestation or reflection that appears within the mirror is actually not, the infinite nature of God. It's something finite. And this brings me to the next point, which also rebuts the idea of pantheism. When Ibn Arabi says that the cosmos, individually or as a totality, is the locus of manifestation of God, that is, the mirror in which there is a reflection of God, because God, in his essence, is infinite, okay? The manifestation of God within created things, within the mirrors, the manifestation is finite, and therefore one has to distinguish the manifestation of God from God himself. Okay, in other words, what of God actually appears in these mirrors is not the totality of God. It is a limited manifestation of God. So we have to distinguish then between God, the manifestation of God, and the loci of manifestation. You have to distinguish between the light, between the reflection of the light in the mirrors, and between the mirrors themselves. So now we made an additional distinction. And that distinction between God in himself and the degree to which there is a manifestation of this God in the cosmos, that is a distinction that Ibn Arabi refers to as the difference between the essence of God, which is God in himself, and the divinity of God, or the divine names. Okay? So the divine names for Ibn Arabi is a positive description of God's manifestation, i.e., the limited reflection of God that appears in various created things. Those limited reflections, taken as a whole, those are the most beautiful names of God. And that limited manifestation of God that appears in created things, and by created things, I don't just mean physical things, right? The highest level of created reality is not physical, right? It's the first intellect. So, what appears in the first intellect and downward, what is reflected of God that we can actually experience, is not God's essence. Rather, it is a finite reflection of God's essence. And that finite reflection of God's essence, that is called the degree of the divinity, the uluhiyah, or the divine names. And the reason why there are many names of God is because in each particular created thing, from the first intellect onward, in each created thing, the reflection of God is different, right? In animals, that reflection of God looks like the various noble qualities that animals have. And in humans, it looks like the various character traits and virtues that humans have. And in the first intellect, it looks like life, knowledge, power, and will. Okay, so depending on what stage or what rank of the cosmos you are looking at, the mirrors are different. Okay, the higher level mirrors, the first intellect, universal soul, these are the noblest mirrors. So you get a greater reflection of the divine in them. And you go down to the physical world, these are, the junkiest mirrors. Hierarchically, these mirrors reflect less of God. So you have to now distinguish between what of God is actually manifest in the reflections and what of God remains completely inaccessible to us. So when Ibn Arabi says God's essence, and he says no one can know God's essence, that refers to God in himself, right? Which is infinite and unknowable, basically. Like reason cannot have a direct knowledge of God's essence. And this is something all Muslims believe in. But we do talk about God's names, right? We worship God by talking about God's names. And God's names have positive meaning for us, right? The compassionate, the powerful, the living. we do have a positive experience and interaction with God's names, and to be more precise, with the manifestations of God's names. So that level of manifestation, the divine names, it's technically speaking, it's the divine names that are manifest in the mirrors, right? When you look at a particular mirror of God, uh, trees, the beautiful sunset, the angels, the Prophet Muhammad, when you look at them, what you actually perceive in them is not God's essence. Nobody perceives God's essence. What you're perceiving in the prophets and humans and others is one or more of God's names. Okay? So this is another reason why the pantheism charge completely fails. Because under pantheism, created things completely display divinity, like fully. All of divinity is encapsulated and exhausted by the universe in pantheism. Ibn Arabi says the complete opposite. Ibn Arabi says that the essence of God, God in himself, remains completely transcendent. And he says you can't even talk about the essence of God using names and attributes. You can only talk about it negatively. You can only deny things from the essence of God, denying all limits, denying all finite descriptions. So what is manifest of God in these created mirrors is not God's essence, it's God's names. And God's names are, you could say, the highest or the first manifestation of God's essence. The God's names is the only degree to which God is known and relatable to creatures. And if you ask further, well, why are the names multiple? Does that mean God is multiple? No, what the names are only multiple because the cosmos consists of multiple things, and each of those multiple things has a distinct relationship to the one essence of God. So for Ibn Arabi, the divine names are not these entities that are floating in the divine essence, which certain Muslim groups believe. For Ibn Arabi, each divine name is a description of a relationship, an intelligible relationship between creatures and God. Okay? So because creatures are multiple, there are multiple relationships on the side of creation between creation and God. There are multiple relationships. And if you switch it the other way around, between God's essence and creation, there's only one relationship, right? Which is like pure dependency. So as far as you look at this from sort of the side of God's essence, there's one relationship because God's essence bestows existence, grants existence to the cosmos. So that's one relationship. But when you look at the relationship from the other perspective, from the perspective of creatures' relationship to God, there are many relationships, and that's why there are many divine names. So the pantheism charge doesn't apply because at most, even if you distort what Ibn Arabi believes and you say, "Oh, God is the universe," which he never says, but even if you try to say that, the best you could say is that the divine names are related to the universe or the creation, but the divine essence is not related to the creation. So that's another reason why the pantheism charge just does not work. And I can read sort of one last thing on this point, if I can find it here. Um, yes, the entity of being is one. So the entity of Wujood, which is God, is one, while the properties are diverse. Okay, in accordance with the diversity of the immutable entities. Those immutable entities are basically the mirrors that I'm talking about. These empty mirrors in which there is a partial reflection of God. So that's sort of my summary, I guess. I guess it was a long summary, but it's important to make this point. Um, and again, Ibn Arabi always uses the language of creation, right? He doesn't say, "Oh, God is not a creator." He still says God brings the cosmos into existence and all this stuff. He still says God is the necessary being. He still says the existence of the possible thing is necessary through him, since it is his locus of manifestation and he is manifest within us. So he still uses all the same theological language uh, that we would use. So here's another quote from Ibn Arabi. The loci of manifestation, you created things, are plural in respect of their entities, but not in respect of the manifest within them. So think of it that there's this one light, which here's my last analogy to help. So consider that you have a bright light, the sun, okay? This is just an analogy. You can't look at the sun. The sun is too bright. None of us can look directly at the sun. But this sun on the surface of the earth is reflected in many ways. It's reflected in various surfaces, mirrors, glass, the lake, the moon, okay? And we can look at the reflection of the sun and all these different things. And we would still say that there's one light, right? At the same time, the degree of light that's reflected in the moon and the star and the ocean and whatever, that degree of light which we can look at is a lesser degree of light than the sun itself, which you can't look at. So the sun itself, which is too bright to look at, that's the essence of God, which nobody could look at. And the degree of that sun that is reflected in various things, that would be the divine names. And those things in which that reflected light appears, each particular thing is what we would call a created being. And together, those reflectors or mirrors, together they form what we call the cosmos. And again, the cosmos taken as a set is not identical to God. Rather, the cosmos taken as a set is merely a mirror in which there is a limited reflection of God. And this is, over in summary, is how I would uh, portray my understanding of Ibn Arabi's worldview.
Lecture gone down the drain, huh?
What Ibn Arabi means by this is, to him,
Mm-hmm.
and to him, what is creation? God is only Khuda, God, Wujood, existence. Allah is Huwa. This word, this usage of Huwa, He is. He is what He is. He is the perfection. He is all the perfections that are contained within the one, that are all essentially related to one another, that are all essentially identical to one another. To him, God is Huwa, and the creation is Huwa La Huwa, that it is and it is not. In a respect, obviously, there are obviously different respects. In one respect, it is, and in another respect, it is not. So, in what respect is it? In the respect that it is the respect in which it is zahir. It is, it belongs to, you could say, in very general terms, it belongs to nafsul amr. It belongs to reality, you can say. And the way in which it is la huwa, it is that is essential darkness. That is the adam that it has in its own self. That is the way in which it is batin, unless God made it zahir. Right? In that sense, it is la huwa. So what Ibn Arabi means is that in one respect, the divinity of the creator, the divinity of the divine is zahir within the creation. And this is not something which is far-fetched. He brings verses for this when God says, for example, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, هو الأول والآخر والظاهر والباطن وهو بكل شيء عليم. So obviously there is some sense in which he is zahir in the creation. Another verse God says, الله نور السماوات والأرض مثل نوره كمشكاة فيها مصباح. So God is the light of the heavens and the earth. In that sense, he says that is the sense in which the creation is huwa, the creation is kamal. In that sense, it is wholly showing the existence of God. It is wholly showing the kamalat of God. A simple example to this is that imagine you have many people who are essentially beggars, who are paupers, because God says in Quran, "Ya ayyuhan nasu antumul fuqara'u ila Allah, wallahu huwal ghaniyyul hamid." right? You are all in front of me, you are beggars, right? I am the only one who is ghani. Now, if you see all these beggars, and you see one beggar which has some money, right? And you knew that this person essentially does not have any money. This person did not have any money. This person does not belong to, in their essence, does not belong to any wealthy characteristics that would have money. So automatically, before even looking at that person, right, your mind would go to, oh, this is someone else's money. Someone gave this to him. This is not their own. Exactly this. In this way, God is Zahir in all of His creation, in the sense that everything in the creation has kamalat, kamals like, kamalat like Wujood, like Sama wal Basar, all these things, Qudra, all these things, they have a reflection of these due to God. And in this sense, God is Zahir in the sense that we say he's al-Khaliq, he's al-Bari, he's al-Qahar, al-Wahhab, al-Fattah, all these divine names which we say with al, right? He is the absolute power. He is the absolute wisdom. In that sense, he is absolutely batin. He is absolutely hidden. Because nobody else has any absolute power except the la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Nobody else has power except God, right? This is what Ibn Arabi is trying to say. That in one sense, God is absolute power, and in that sense, he's absolutely hidden. And in another sense, he is al-Qahar, right? The form of power has manifested into his creation as well. And in that sense, he's absolutely, he's Zahir in all of his creation. So this is what Ibn Arabi is trying to say. He's differentiating between the sense of huwa and la huwa.
Hmm.
Yes, this is not something which is far fetched from Quran. Rather, this is something, and if you read his works, this is absolutely rather in line with Quran, and his works are filled with Quranic verses and ahadith, which are in these verses, and the journal sayings that, for example, la
Um,
hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, and others.
does Ibn Arabi, does he just start all of his works like in such a philosophical deep matter, or does he have like introduction book,
Mm,
like read this before you read the other books?
no, he does not have any, you could say, introductory work. Obviously, some
He
works are
has
longer.
Futuhat al-Maki. His introductory work is 10 volumes. Then you can read his short books.
Yes. His introductory work is the last work you would read in like your class of Irfan. Rather, not even that. I don't think they will read the whole Fatuhat. They actually teach Fusus al-Hikam first. So, so
Going in reverse order that the Sheikh would wish,
yeah,
actually.
yes. Fatuhat comes later, actually. Yeah, but he has a deep commentarial tradition that you can draw from. You can read Mulla Jami, you can read Hamza Fanari, you can read Kashani, you can read Qaisari, you can read Jili, right? You can read all these scholars, whatever the one you prefer, you can read them. The thing is, this is a very important part of the Sunni tradition, the Sunni Sufi tradition, as well as the Sunni Kalam tradition. But nowadays, at this time, this is heavily ignored in the current discourse that we are having around Sunni theology. And I would love to discuss it. I know people back in Pakistan, at least the intellectual environment that I grew up in. Uh, they know Sheikh Akbar, and we talk about him and we discuss these ideas. But uh, coming here, I do not see that much of uh, constructive discussions on common points that we can talk about. And there's always this rhetoric that, we only follow Quran and Sunnah. But the thing is, yeah, we follow Quran and Sunnah as well. And what we are presenting is absolutely in line with Quran and Sunnah, such that every page, every moment of it is Quran and Sunnah, and they're citing it from Quran and Sunnah. But the thing is that if by Quran and Sunnah but you mean only and only the way you understand it, then no, obviously not. Then that is your one, that is your interpretation, that is your tafsir, that is not Quran and Sunnah, bima huwa Quran and Sunnah. So this is a rhetoric that is played against Shaykhul Akbar and Shaykhul Kabir and the Garan of the Madhabul Falasifa and Sufia. So I would be very happy if we can discuss these things with Sunnis as well and build a constructive platform through which we can look at other more nuanced and other more uh, diverse matters in which we disagree.